Eyes in the sky, gazing far into the night. I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light shine through. If you believe it's true, baby, won't you let the light shine through for you.
Detection Radio. I'm Kay.
And I'm Chad.
We pray you all had a blessed week. It's great to welcome back our dear friend and brother in Christ, Gary Wayne. Gary, welcome back. How are you?
Well, doing very, very well, and up at my summer cottage, so things are good at my end, and so happy to be back tonight to discuss with you end-time prophecy, and hopefully, I think what we're going to talk about is going to stimulate and drive some more curiosity to search out more about end-time prophecy, because for me, it's my absolute sort of passion that I've done over the last, I guess, closing on 40 years now. So I can't seem to get enough of prophecy, and so glad to be here talking with you and Chad about that tonight.
It's always wonderful to have you come back on with us.
Yes.
And you're just a plethora of knowledge, like I always say, and end-time prophecy, we're living it out right now, and it's wonderful to have you on to talk about it, and we appreciate you taking the time to come back on with us. I'm going to go ahead and say tonight's opening prayer, and then we're going to get right into it. Are we all ready?
Yes.
Terrific.
Okay. Dear Father in heaven, thank you again for getting us through this week and for just holding us up and getting us through the difficult times that we're living in, Father. We know that you're carrying us, you're protecting us, and that you're leading our steps. So we pray tonight, Father, that you guide tonight's show, that your words become our words, and that we are able to give you the glory, Father, and give your word the way that you want us to give it. Please put a hedge of protection around our audience, around Gary, Chad, and me, and just bless everyone that's listening and everyone that's here. And again, Father, we give you all the glory and all the praise. In Jesus' holy and mighty name we pray. Amen.
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 You've been on before, which is awesome. And for the people, though, that have not heard you before, could you please let everyone know a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm the author of a book called The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Humankind. And in that book, it's not just about giants. It was really a book designed to link Genesis 6 with end-time prophecy. And what I thought was going to be a short story turned out to be a rather sizable project in that book, but it's heavily weighted with prophecy as well, because my passion is history, my passion is mythology, and my passion is prophecy. So it's nice to be able to link all of those things. And so I think most people, they kind of connect me to more just with giants and ancient history, which, again, I absolutely love to talk about. But I'm so excited to talk about prophecy because I said it's been my passion. And really, I got into prophecy in about 1980, 1981. So, we're talking over 35 years of prophecy research, and just love to have a chance to just sort of kick around prophecy and compare notes, because the one thing I've learned about people who do prophecy is that there are a lot of different takes on a lot of different aspects. Although everybody knows what the end looks like, we're not always on the same page as to what the beginning is or what the middle looks like, and how those events come about in the end time, and whether or not it's more allegory and what the time frame of those events are. So many different question marks that you can, it's just great to have a discussion on end time prophecy, and I'm sure we're going to get people agreeing, disagreeing with what we're going to talk about tonight, but that's the point, to understand it more, because I really believe we're not in the end time yet. We may be in the last days, but we are certainly peering at the horizon and seeing, I think, the end time about to come about. And for me, the end time is like the last 10 or 15 years, with the last 7 being the actual end time. So I think there's an important lead up of things that happen before we get into the last 7 years. But there are still significant things yet that have to take place. So that's why I say I think we're close. I think we can see it on the horizon, but we're not there yet. And people shouldn't get the cart, in my opinion, ahead of the horse in terms of how everything has to be in place, or it's not the end time. And I think if we've learned anything over history is A, not to make date predictions, and B, is that if everything's not in place, then it can't be the end time. And those have been the 2 biggest mistakes that people have made in the past on prophecy, I think.
That's very true. You get different interpretations, and sometimes people will twist it to fit their own agenda.
And again, I think that's such an important thing. And for me, I mean, I have some very, very key sort of doctrines that I like to abide by. The first one is whether it's prophecy or anything, is always look to what Jesus said first, and then assemble all other prophecy around that, as opposed to trying to manipulate what Jesus said to fit your agenda. I mean, Jesus' words aren't there to be manipulated. They're there to be the Rosetta Stone to assemble the timing and the time frame and what certain things mean. And we didn't talk on every aspect of prophecy, but he gave a significant roadmap of the sign of his second coming and what the end times were going to look like. And I think the other doctrine is that I like to do is not to only use the doctrines, or not the doctrines, I'm sorry, not to only use the prophecies or the passages or the verses or the words or the sentences that fit your agenda or your belief, because again, you shouldn't manipulate Bible or prophecy. If you're going to look at any aspect in prophecy, you need to assemble all of the passages so that you can assemble that around if Jesus spoke to that, but make sure that there aren't any passages that are in conflict to what you think the agenda is. And for me, when I put all the passages that I'm aware of around a particular item, it tells a sequence of events and a clarity that I think makes it pretty simple.
Do you use primarily the Bible only to get into the prophecy, to understand it, or do you use other texts also?
I tend to use the Bible explicitly for trying to understand what's going to happen to us in terms of Christians and in terms of the Jewish and the people of Israel. I will utilize other texts, scriptures, history books, mythology, whatever, to try and better understand what the adversary is looking at and what they're doing to bring about the end time. Because what I do is I find it brings context and clarity to what the Bible is saying, but not vice versa. I mean, they have a clear agenda, and they have a day with destiny that they want to bring on, and they have certainly a number of ways that they'd like to be able to go about doing that, and a time frame that they'd like to be able to do that, but they're not in control of that. But what is interesting, though, is to match up what they're doing, what they have done, and what they're saying they plan to do with what the Bible says, because it is absolutely frightening and it's absolutely enlightening in terms of the reality and the somberness of what is about to take place. It is. I mean, you couldn't write this stuff because nobody would nobody would believe it. And that maybe is probably the problem with prophecy is that it is so darn scary that people don't want to take it serious enough.
Now, Gary, are you aware of the Malachi prophecy?
Which Malachi are we referring to?
The one that Chris Putnam and Tom Horn talk about in their books?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Well, we're going to hand it over to you, Gary, and let you start us out with the prophecies.
Okay, no problem. And feel free to jump in at any point in time because I know both of you are, prophecy buffs as well and biblical experts. So feel free to jump in and, further discuss an issue or add something to it just to help sort of the audience along. So I think one of the most interesting things that I found when I was doing research on prophecy, and what I did was I actually tried to log every passage on every subject of prophecy that was important to me, and I probably didn't get them all, but I've got a lot of them, and so I can just sort of go to those when I want to put a set of events together. But what I found was extraordinary about doing that, and sort of the outcome of what I got from that is how the Bible is just so perfect in its symmetry, so perfect in how it doesn't contradict itself, and so perfect in the language and the allegory. And when there is allegory, it is in the Bible to define it, so you don't have to go outside and you don't have to make things up, you don't have to try and twist things. So that was one of the first things that I really found absolutely extraordinary about the Bible. And again, if you're going to rely on the Bible as being the Word of God, I guess that shouldn't be surprising. But I don't think people, in my opinion, respect how well the Bible is written in terms of the prophecy narratives, and understanding that it flows through the whole book and it takes a little bit of work to put it together. So I think when we look at end time prophecy is that there are things that need to happen which are huge stumbling blocks. And although I also go back to another rule of doctrine that will help make some of these things happen more easily. And that would be, I guess, for me in the first place is that you have things like a world religion that has to come to play. And that has to be in place before we start the last 7 years, because it is Babylon of the end time that is going to be the one that puts the world government together. And then it's going to dominate that 10 king or 10 economic zones or 10 spheres of influence in the end time in terms of what my research shows. And so it's going to have to form first. And we're also going to have people have the world continually somehow move towards economic unification economically. We're going to have to see more of the borders come down. We're going to have to see a world government that's actually forming and not just sort of lumbering along like it is today and fracturing a little bit. But that's going to take something extraordinary to make that happen. And then the other thing that really is extraordinary that's going to have to take place before we can actually say we're coming into the last days, and those would be the years just preceding the last 7 years for me, is the resolution of how the sacrifice is going to be permitted to take place again on a wing of a temple or the location of the temple in the end time, however you want to look at that. So those are the things that make it difficult for people to buy in that this is actually going to happen, even though we have Israel, the country of Israel in place, even though we have the technology in place, even though we have the complete geopolitical assembly of nations in place to bring about the end time. But I think we still need a little bit more in terms of the misuse of technology as it was like in the days of Noah, taking the lead from Jesus again. But I think these things can happen a lot more quickly when there's catastrophic events that come along. And I think that these very large stumbling blocks kind of go away when catastrophic events make these things possible. And one of the things I note about historical prophecy that's been fulfilled is they tend to be fulfilled through catastrophic events. So where things where you thought weren't going to play, people might have thought wouldn't take place and couldn't take place, they could because of the catastrophe, or an outcome from that catastrophe makes part of prophecy completion happen. So, a classic example of that for us in more modern time would be the creation of the nation-state of Israel. Out of World War II and out of World War I, out of two huge catastrophic events, the nation-state of Israel is permitted to be recreated. First, you have to take down the Ottoman Empire, World War I. Then it becomes a sort of a unlawful, unruly area governed by Britain, but no real nationhood in that zone. And then you have the Holocaust in World War II and this coming together of the Jewish nation and sympathy for the Jewish nation for this to happen, whereas in the previous 2,000 years, that didn't happen. And so I think if people are concerned, well, maybe concerned's not the right word, if people find it difficult to believe that we could actually be crazy enough to have a world government, or it's absolutely ludicrous to think that people could be worshiping under one religion, or that the Jewish people are going to somehow get access to the mosque in Jerusalem that's held by the Muslims to do their daily sacrifice. I think those are legitimate objections, but we do know it's going to happen because that's what prophecy says, and so it's a matter of how it's going to happen and how fast that happens. So is there anything in there sort of into my lead-up that you have any questions on?
I do. As far as catastrophes, does that include anything that is caused by man?
It's inclusive of man-made and natural catastrophes, and probably some outside influences as well. I would include, part of, I think, what helps bring this about is a complete financial collapse, which is a man-made doing. I think some of the other catastrophes that people get brainwashed with aren't the real catastrophes. Those would be like a global warming or an overpopulation or peak oil and all of those sorts of ideas where they're designed not as a catastrophe because they're not legitimate. They're just designed by the secret societies and these polytheist religions that are working together to bring about world government, to cattle herd people into world government because it helps bring the borders down, right? So we have to separate contrived catastrophes or catastrophes like that than I think from a natural catastrophe or a naturally happening man-made catastrophe. So I suppose, though, if you look at a financial catastrophe, that could be manipulated as well. But that's not a catastrophe that is not a catastrophe where these other things are just things that they're making people believe, or they're doing things with the environment that has nothing to do with global warming to make it look like we've got an environmental issue. So I think those are the things that we should be looking towards when we look at the fulfillment of prophecy. And Babylon is one of those, as with, I guess, the rapture are a couple of the most divisive and most misunderstood aspects of prophecy. And Babylon, because it has to happen first, I think is one that we should probably, maybe take a little deeper look at it. And this is not the world government. And again, that would be the first thing that I think people have to be very careful. I think it will control the world government just as the woman rides the beast of these empires and rides the beast of the end time empire. That means it controls it. That's what a rider does. And in all of the past empires, in my opinion, or the Antichrist type figures, because a lot of people think that seven kings are actually seven Antichrist-type figures as opposed to the empires, but they're still part of that empire. So to me, it's a nice distinction, and it could be one or the other, but they're still absolutely linked together, and you can't pull them apart. And they were dominated by the religion of Babylon. And this religion of Babylon was the religion of Babel, the resurgent antediluvian religion at Babel. And this is the same religion that dominated Sodom and Gomorrah. This is the same religion that dominated the Nephilim in the pre-flood epoch. This is the same religion that is dominated by the development of the seven sacred sciences and the technology that allows the corruption and the manipulation of the earth and the creation of Nephilim-type beings. And so we have to understand that, first and foremost, this is a religion that rules over all of the people of the world except for those who are going to remain loyal to God and to Jesus. And so I think that, and to what it really says in the Bible as opposed to what they're going to tell us what the Bible means in the end time, because they're going to absolutely turn the Bible inside and out through this polytheist religion that's going to take place. So it's a religion, first and foremost, that sits on many waters. So it is a world religion. And the second thing is that we need to remember about Babylon is it clearly states in both the Old and New Testaments that Babylon is a city. And so not only is it a religion, it's a religion that's focused on a specific city. And not only is it a religion that's located in a specific city, but we also look into Jeremiah and Isaiah a little bit, and I think Nahum and Revelation for sure, that this is a entity that is heavily involved with free trade because of the global trade. And that's why global free trade is one of the key aspects that when we're looking towards how the end time is going to come about, keep watching how this global free trade thing keeps forming. And it's also one of the main traits of the Holy Roman Empire and the Roman Empire was free trade. And it's, again, it's something that they're going to want to recreate. And it was also emblematic of the city of Tyre, which again was a trading city, and which is one of the allegories that's used in the Old Testament to describe the end time Babylon. Just as Nineveh was also one of those cities, because it's a city of blood in those allegories, and also Babylon, where it is absolutely tied to polytheism and the harlot religion. And a lot of people believe that Babylon is an allegory for Atlantis, because Atlantis was the center of what they were trying to form as the world government of the antediluvian age and controlled the trade of the world. And so that is why you have these secret societies, and certainly the inspirational person about this would have been the Templars, not the Templars as a person, but as a group that were trying to sort of perpetuate this idea of a new Atlantis that Francis Bacon then developed into a book called The New Atlantis in the late 1500s, early 1600s, and was also the inspiration for the founding of the Royal Society, which again developed the seven sacred sciences, but I'm going down a history path there. So when we look at Babylon, it's a number of things, and the allegories that are used to describe Babylon are all part of how you understand Babylon. So the first thing we ought not to do is just say it is just a religion, or it is just a government, or it is just a economic institution. It is, or it's just a city. It is all of those things, but it is not the world government, for it rides the beast. It isn't the 10-nation empire or the new Atlantis. And for people who don't realize, Atlantis had 10 empires within its greater empire that were trying to conquer the whole world. And that's why they're trying to create the new Atlantis. And the same people who create the problems like global warming in terms of what they say is a problem, or peak oil or overpopulation, that comes out of the doctrine of the Club of Rome that was formed in the late 60s and early 70s. And their prime goal is to cattle herd people with these ideas into what they already have the world split up into 10 economic zones so that they can bring about the new Atlantis. So understand from the other side, they are working towards this, and they're very, very organized, and they do want to bring about things that happened in the past, which is absolutely crazy because you would think that they wouldn't be that obvious, but apparently they can hide things in plain sight, and nobody really, for the most part, watches what they're doing or connects the dots on that. So what do we have with Babylon? Well, we have a rising religion that's going to make the way for the Antichrist. We have a rising religion that is going to make the way for the world government. And these 10 nations that become the world government will partner with the Antichrist at about the midpoint of the last 7 years to overthrow Babylon. So we know that it is different than the world government. We know that it is different than the Antichrist. They work together, they support each other, but then they divide and turn on each other. And even 3 of those empires of the 10 will be destroyed at the midpoint because 3 of them are overthrown. So it won't be a bloodless coup. And I also believe that those 3 that are going to be overthrown in the last 3.5 years of the tribulation, or at the midpoint of that last 7 years, are going to be the Western democracies. And the reason why I think they're going to be the Western democracies is because the Antichrist in Daniel comes along and says, I'm going to redistribute the plunder, which is a very socialist term, and he's going to redistribute things in a way that will make Obama's statement of redistributing the wealth pale by comparison. But the wealth lies within the Western nations, the Western democracies. And I think they're going to overthrow those because that's where most of the rebellion or the people standing against this world government, that's where most of the resistance is going to come from. So this Babylon has to rise first, in my opinion, because it enables world government, and through the end-time religion, it will enable the sacrifice to be taken place in Jerusalem. Because what happens in the world religion as that aspect of it is that it has the ability to umbrella all of the other religions. And how it's going to do this is it's not going to be, in my opinion, I know it's quite popular today to say that it's going to be an Islamic end religion. That's just one religion that's going to be umbrellaed under this master religion. Because again, everything that happens in Revelation has happened before. All the answers are there. So we know it's not this slim little Islamic rogue portion of monotheism. It's actually polytheism that's umbrelling and destroying monotheism. And so it needs to find a way to umbrella all of its sister religions around the world because they are the same religion. That's a little easier. And secondly, they have to bring in the monotheists, the Christians, the Muslims, and the Jewish people. And this is going to take some doing and some catastrophes and some predictions and things to ensure this happens. But I'm getting probably a little bit ahead of myself at this point. This is the religion that is talked about in Revelation that has 2 horns like a lamb and speaks like a dragon. So what we take from that is that it has to have a Jewish Christian sort of veneer or superficial clothing on top of this abomination that's underneath, because it talks like a dragon. It talks like the seraphim angels and Satan that originally created these polytheist religions and organizations way back in the time of Enoch, the evil son of Cain, and the time of the Nephilim, and the time of Nimrod, and the time of Sodom and Gomorrah, and time of Egypt, and all the great empires, whether it's Roman, they all had the same religion. And this is the religion that's coming back, except that this time it's going to have the gloss of a Christian religion. And the easiest way to do that, in my opinion, is to use the gloss that's already in place on a universal religion that's already in place and is already a city and is already in a city state and is already located on seven hills, which is what is prophesied in Revelation. And it's my contention that this end-time Babylon will be the city of Rome. So Rome will be the place that will be the center of the world religion. It will be the center of world trade, and it will take a tribute on every transaction that will take place around the world. It may be a very small tribute, but it will take a tribute. Now, in language that people may understand better than a tribute on how this works in a legal system, although I would say it's not a legal system, is that that's what you call a value-added tax. And in most countries around the world, U.S. as one exception, there is a value-added tax in place, and it's called a goods and services tax or a value-added tax. And every time there's a transaction, you pay X amount of percentage of taxes to the federal government of your country to do that. This will be a value-added tax like that. So every transaction that takes place, it is going to take part of that transaction. So you can see how the Leviathan of this religion reaches into business and it reaches into the government to be able to have these laws and control the governments and to gather this wealth. Because we know the wealth of Babylon is going to be absolutely extraordinary. I mean, prophecy just talks and talks about Babylon and its riches and its jewels and its gold and its clothes, and so it's going to take, in my opinion, it's going to take a value-added tax or a tribute right off the surface of every transaction. So this is going to be the new World Trade Center, for lack of a better term. This is going to be the new capital city of the world. This is going to be the capital religious center of the world. And I think we have a religion there that accepted a lot of polytheist gloss right at its inception under Constantine and has progressively adopted more polytheist iconology and things like that as it has transitioned throughout the millennia. And I think we also have a Jesuit black pope in place who is changing doctrine and becoming more political and more environmentally political and more religiously political in all aspects of trying to lay the foundation stones in an ever-quickening pace to bring this sort of together. He won't be enough to do it, but he is the one that is propelling it faster than anybody has in the past. And I think somebody was just about to ask a question there.
I was just going to ask you if you could give like a brief description of the Black Pope, who he is and what his role is.
So the Black Pope is the leader of the Jesuits, and the Jesuits were a order that came about in about the 1500s, and they were to replace this military outreach that the Templars were after the Templars were destroyed in 1307. And the Jesuits were formed under the guise and the support of the Benedictines, the Augustines, and the Cistercians, and their primary role at the beginning was a development of the seven liberal sciences, and they have an initiatory aspect to this society. And they were to be the Gnostic moles within the church with more of a military or leading edge assault to do the beckoning of the Gnostics and have done so ever since. And in the prophecy of a different Malachi, this would be Pope Malachi of Catholic prophecy, the last pope would be what they call the Black Pope and would also be a replacement pope or an anti-pope. And so what we have for the first time is we have a Black Pope, which is the leader of the Jesuits, leading all of Catholicism as the Pope of all of Catholicism, and that's the White Pope. So now we have a Black Pope leading all of Catholicism, and we have a Pope that for only the second time in history, because there was one that was removed, I think, in the 1400s, Pope Gregory, as I recall. For the second time only in history, we have a pope ruling where another pope is still alive. And this is the false pope or the anti-pope that makes the way for the end-time religion and the false prophet. And I know a lot of people want to wedge Francis into being either Antichrist or the false prophet. Now, I think he is a false prophet, but he's not the false prophet. And I think he's just doing his role in putting the pieces together. I may be proven wrong on that, but I think A, he's too old, and B, that doesn't really fall in line with an uncanonized Catholic prophecy, but just the time frame of it just doesn't seem to make some sense. So the big question gets to be is how does it move from Francis trying to bring all the religions together and working together and saying that God is called by different names around the world, which is again a Gnostic doctrine. So that's why I'm very confident that Jesuits are Gnostics because they preach Gnosticism, and I think Francis is preaching Gnosticism as well. But it's more than just trying to unite and talking friendly, because these religions, even though they're talking more and more the same language, they still have issues and local issues where they want control and different weights on things that they want to do, and they still have the monotheists to worry about, even though they're trying through the molds within Christianity to prepare Christianity for the fall. So there's going to be a few things that has to come along that will come about, I think, through catastrophes. And these are going to be orchestrated catastrophes, I believe, or a little bit of false magic that is coming to play. So I think everybody out there might be aware that the Roman Catholics are fundamentally taken away with the Mary apparitions and the Mary cult and calling her the Mother of God. And so there's a whole bunch of things that are already in place with Mary that is not amongst the rest of Christian denominations. Well, these Mary apparitions have been happening for a long period of time, and I'll cite just a few of them to lay a platform here. But Joan of Arc saw an apparition of Mary, and that's why she is so popular in Gnostic revisionist history and is continually recycled because of what she did, but as much as overlaying that her visions came from Mary, and I'll polish that off before I get to the end, because most people don't understand that this apparitions was absolutely Mary in their belief system, not Mary, Mother of Jesus, but in their belief system. And then you have Lourdes, and then you have Fatima, you have Rwanda, but Medjugorje is the one to watch. And Medjugorje Mary apparitions took place in the 90s for the most part and continued into the early 2000s. And what was going on there was the Mary apparition reappeared, and it was depicted exactly by the people who could see this apparition as the sign in Revelation 12. So you have this picture of this woman and these 12 stars and this blue dress and the sun and the moon and all of the allegory that's coming in Revelation 12. And I have a book, and I'll cite it in my Genesis 6 conspiracy book, where this description that these witnesses saw, and there's three, because only three saw this, even though all these other people were around, and I'll explain that in a second. This is how they described this apparition. Now, these were children, and this apparition took these three children in to initiate them into their education and what their commission was going to be. And believe me, if you're not a Catholic, you're probably not all that familiar with this, but if you are a Catholic, you are very familiar with the Medjugorje apparitions. And many of them have pilgrimaged over there to see the site. So a very, very important thing that dominates in Catholicism. And so these three have a timetable that is kept secret, and they are going to be coming out when they're adults, which, if they're young children in the mid to late 90s, we're now over 20 years away, so they're getting into the prime sort of mission age, which would be in the 30s and into the 40s, but generally as it goes in the 30s. So I'm expecting them to come out pretty soon, and what they're going to do is they are going to come out in a series of 10 warnings and 10 prophecies and 10 catastrophes. And their story is going to be to convert before destruction comes. Convert to the one true religion before God sends his judgment. Convert to one world religion, one government, one people, or disaster is going to come. And so they're going to set a date, convert by this date, or this is going to happen. And the first prediction that comes true, according to how this goes, people aren't going to take that much notice. But as the calamities and catastrophes become bigger and more, they're going to resonate. And whether or not they have to go through all 10 or not, I don't know, but they've got 10. They are going to scare people into the new Babel. And again, it makes sense because that is the doctrine of Babel, where people came together under one government, one religion, one language to save themselves from destruction from the face of the earth. This is why Babylon has part of that allegory for the end time, because this is going to happen again. And I think there will be other false prophets as well that bring this along, and I think there'll be other catastrophes and signs and things that are all going to drive this to a level where even the elite of Christianity are going to be deceived if that were possible. That's how powerful the deception is going to be. So these catastrophes, these signs, these wonders, these things that are going to happen are going to overtake the world, but led by what I believe is the church in Rome today. And then they're going to destroy Christianity from within, that they're going to de-deify Jesus so that from a Gnostic perspective, he can take his place alongside the other so-called enlighteners that have come in the past, people like Buddha or Zoroaster or Hermes, and a whole list of other ones that they would assemble along there as these people sent to humankind to help them develop into godhood, which is, again, another Gnostic doctrine. So these moles that are in Christianity are already at work destroying and diluting and leading Christians and Christian organizations astray, and already doing more and more and more of this world religion that's coming. So expect more of that. But how are they going to de-deify Jesus? They are going to deny, which a lot of people do today in a number of ways, but they are going to deny the resurrection of Jesus. And they have to, because that's the only way they can have all the religions agree. If you have one religion that says, we have the Word sent from God who sits at the right-hand side of God, and that is the Messiah, the other religions aren't going to come to play. So they have to deceive Christians. They have to destroy that. And they'll have to destroy Paul as a heretic, which is what comes out of the Gnostic scriptures of Qumran, which were written by the Essenes, which were, again, a polytheist rogue entity, one of the three religions of Judea, but polytheist as opposed to monotheist. And they describe in their language, when they talk about the evil liar or the heretic, they're referring to Paul. That's what the Gnostics believe, because they believe he is the one that took Jesus from prophet to godhood. And so they're going to destroy Paul, and they're going to deny Jesus resurrected, that he actually survived the cross and was taken down before he died and was nursed back to health and married Mary Magdalene, which is why you have all of this Gnostic stuff out there about Mary Magdalene and her resurgence. But what they're really talking about is the children that they allegedly have. I don't believe this. Understand this for context. This is what the other side is doing, and here's what they're going to bring to play. And they say they have the evidence to prove this. So whatever they're going to prove, it's going to absolutely rock a lot of Christians. But again, I think people have to, take a step back because they say, well, there's no way that that's possible. Yet we were told that even the elect or the elite or the most learned or the leaders and the most knowledgeable will be deceived by some of these deceptions. So be very, very careful no matter what they say. Do not lose your faith in Jesus as being sent from God and went back to him and who is our Redeemer for not only us but all who will be saved by God.
Amen.
And
Gary, I do have a question for you. The apparitions, do you believe that they were demonic?
oh, absolutely. I mean, this is an apparition of Isis or an Isis-like character. They just classify it as Mary. Sometimes they even classify it as Mary Magdalene.
Well, I
But
know
this
that
is
Fatima, that name was the name that was Muhammad's daughter. That has always stood out to me. I thought it was very strange.
Yeah, very, very strange, and definitely connected in some sort of way to help lay the seeds to bring the religions together. This is a well thought out, fallen angel, demonic, human organized religion and organized secret societies plot that is being built over the millennia to bring this about.
Yeah, it all
And they know
plays
that,
into, like you said, to lead people astray and pull them
yes,
away from God.
yes, and to give them reasons to believe that there is only one other religion, and all other ones that aren't this true religion that they're going to tell us are just either offshoots or perverted offshoots. And so there are little things put in all the way on all these types of things that are going to help bring all of the religions of the world together, except for the naysaying Christians and other people, because I do believe there's going to be just more than Christians that stand up against Babylon and the world government. Maybe not for Christian ideals, but there will be other people that stand against both the religion and the world government, who will be persecuted and slaughtered just like the Christians will be. And I also think there'll be some Jewish people that stand up against it, and I also believe there will be some Muslims that stand up against it. So I think there's going to be a number of groups that are going to be out there to no avail, because the overwhelming forces are going to have control. And these overwhelming forces are the spurious forces that are pretty much in control of the world today. So this is partly how this religion will come out. So it's about attacking Christianity and bringing that to its knees, but not totally destroying it, because they want to bring the remnant back and the leadership back under this umbrella. This religion will umbrella all of the religions of the world and probably permit them to pray and to worship with the vernacular names of the local gods, but understanding the overall entity of it is the same religion. And that's why the Christianity that's reformed will be the Gnostic Christian religion. And most people don't realize that most Western Gnostics, they don't call themselves Buddhists. They call themselves Gnostic Christians, because they recognize Jesus as a prophet, but a human and mortal prophet who didn't die on the cross. And so when people say they're Christian and they're preaching Gnostic doctrine, you need to understand they're not technically lying to you, because they believe they're Christian. They're just Gnostic Christian, and it's a whole different belief system. It's polytheism as opposed to monotheism. And so this Gnostic Christianity will be the one that looks like a lamb but speaks like a dragon. And this Babylon religion will be sitting on all of these waters of the world. So this is part of what's going to happen to bring about these end-time events. And out of that, if there is an umbrella religion that permits other religions to work together under this new unified doctrine, somehow, some way, that manifests itself in the ability at the signing of the 7-year world government covenant to allow the people of Israel to once again begin the sacrifice, and as Daniel says, on a wing of the temple. And so what that means is it may not be right in the mosque, but it could be off to the side somewhere. And I know there's a lot of dispute out there exactly where the temple was located. So I think what's going to happen there, because Daniel is specific to say that the sacrifice happened on a wing of the temple, that it's going to be off center from where the mosque is, but it's going to be made known that that's was part of the overall temple complex of the time. So I think that's how we get to the sacrifice. So again, we see Babylon as the key to assembling this. Now, Babylon will negotiate and bring all the nations together in this confederacy of 10 economic zones that will also guarantee the safety of Israel, which is why Israel will accept this, because for the first time they're going to be guaranteed safety, at least that's what they're told, by this world government. It will bring together representatives, one representative from each of these 10 trading zones to govern the world. And this will work for the first 3.5 years. And so this is where people get confused with Babylon being that actual government. It will heavily influence it. It will heavily control it, just as the Roman Catholic Church did for, over 1,000 years. And after the fall, even after the fall of the Roman Empire, controlled all the Western nations. So it will be that powerful, but it won't be the kings, right? It won't be the true rulers. So, and I think we also need catastrophes to bring things about that will also maybe be part of these warnings from the three that will come out of the Medjugorje initiation, but there could be a nuclear bomb or a large war that takes place that includes maybe nuclear weapons, that once that happens will drive this thing that we have to come together and live together, or we're going to destroy ourselves from the face of the earth. So it could be a war that drives it. I believe there's going to be economic disasters that happen, and everybody knows our stock markets are absolutely a house of cards, and our economic dependency on the world provides for domino effects unlike anything that we've ever seen in the past, because once it starts to roll, similar to what we saw in 2008 and 2007 when it started to begin, this will be ever-increasing shockwaves to the economic stability of the world, which again I think pushes us into world government to stop these things. Somehow they'll present some solutions that are absolutely ridiculous, but people will buy them. So I think we're going to have some economic issues as well, and then we're going to have other massive deceptions, and I do believe we're going to see something that is a deception on the alien level. Whether or not it's an encounter of the fourth kind or an encounter of the fifth kind, because I think we'll have both. They're going to bring this alien thing out, and again, in all of the science fiction movies that you watch, as soon as we have or find out that we're not alone in the universe, in all of science fiction, we have world government. So they're telling us, again, if we want to listen, part of what the plan is, in my opinion. And they're going to scare us with that. And we're going to be led to believe that we have to fight for our freedom, similar to what you could look at the Star Wars movie would be from how they would present this, where you have the dualistic forces of good and evil, and you're having to fight for your freedom. And in this case, they're going to tell us that Lucifer is equal to God, and that he fights for us, and he does not want to keep us in darkness. He doesn't want to keep us from evolving into gods, and he doesn't want to keep us ignorant and with no knowledge. He is the freedom fighter that fights for us, but we're going to have to fight for our freedom away from the oppressive God of the Bible. And they will present so many things like God is the oppressive God of the Bible, and here's some examples, like the flood or Sodom and Gomorrah will be classic examples, or Babel. And any time humans were flourishing, he comes along and puts humankind back into basically a state of ignorance and almost not civilized basis, as what survivors might have been coming out of the flood. So that'll be their story, and they will also say that when the New Testament says that Jesus was resurrected, that was an allegory. And that the whole Bible is an allegory because that's Gnostic doctrine. And the New Testament will have to be understood in what the true meaning is, which only the organizations like the Gnostics and the Rosicrucians and the Freemason societies have the true meaning of what that allegory actually means. And so they're going to say that even Jesus' story will tell you that it's an allegory, because they're going to come out and say that when Jesus said his sign to that evil generation that he lived in would be the sign of Noah, not the sign of Noah, the sign of Jonah, that was an allegory, because how could somebody be swallowed by a fish and taken to the grave and live there for 3 days and not die or be resurrected? And so they're going to say that that wasn't possible, and therefore what Jesus alluded to as a sign was an allegory for the way or the path to enlightenment, which is what these polytheist religions are preaching and always have, to evolve up the ziggurat or levels of Freemasonry so that knowledge will propel you to become a god. So these are all the different things that are going to be coming about that I think is going to help Babylon work with these rising economic zones to form the 10-nation world government. And that is a lot to do in a very short period of time. So even with catastrophes, this is going to take a while, I think. And the reason why I'm spending so much time on what it takes to get us into the last days is that we hear all the time that people are saying, now it's coming, now it's coming. And it's like, no. You can't have the end time until everything is in place. And so we see the rising of it, but we don't actually see what we need to see to say that these are the last days, let alone the end time or the last 7 years. We're just starting to see, I think, for the first time in history, all of the pieces starting to come together, but it's going to take some time.
Yeah. I totally believe that we're rapidly approaching the tipping point, but like you said, we haven't quite got there just yet. Once we reach the tipping point, there's no going back.
Do you think we're
Yeah.
going through the birth pains right now, getting
Yeah, I
ready
do.
for that?
I do, and I think we have things that would in prophecy to suggest that that we are in the birth pangs and we are in that generation. And I do look at the fig tree generation as being one of the key things that Jesus said for the timing. I believe Israel being a nation state and in place to fulfill the Ezekiel 37 and 38 prophecies, if I've got my Bible right, is part of that fig tree generation. So then the question gets to be is, when does that countdown start, and how long is a generation? And I look at it in a couple of ways. Is you could look at it as 1947, or you could look at it as 1967, because is it Jerusalem or is it actually having a nation? I actually think it's more Jerusalem, but I do hold the possibilities that it could be the nation state. But if you look at a generation, there's only really two numbers that we get in the Bible for a generation. One is the reign of a king, which is about 40 years, which I don't think equates to a generation. And another one is 70 years. If we apply 70 years to 1947, what do we come up with? About 2017. And if we apply 70 years to 1967, we get 2037. So I think we have a window there of about 30 years where this kind of makes some sense without getting firm on numbers, because again, we don't really know what the exact generation is in terms of prophecy. I think we do, but we're not 100% sure on that, and I don't like to get hung out on dates. So I think that's why I say I think we're on the horizon, though, because we have Israel, and it can fulfill the Ezekiel prophecy and all the other prophecies that has this nation state in place that Jesus even speaks about at the time of the abomination, where people of Judea go to flee to the desert. I think we're very, very close. And if I match that up with some other prophecies that are non-canonized, like prophecy of Malachi that we talked about in the Catholic Bible with the last pope. There's also some arguments as to, and I'm not going to get into the ins and outs and nuances, that the next pope could be the last pope in terms of how they counted him. But the signs seem to match up to what Malachi was talking about as being the last pope. Another one to match up might be the idea that the prophecy of Jubilees that started with the start of the Ottoman Empire, and that has the last Jubilee. Basically, 2017 as the 10th Jubilee is the beginning of the Messianic time, is what Jewish prophecy would call the end times. And so we have a sort of a coalescence of 2017 as a possible start date to move into the last years, but not the last 7 years, because there's still too many things to be put in place. So I think when we look at that, I think we're very, very close to having things come together. So somewhere between 2017 and 2037, I think we're going to see some significant events, and I think sooner than later. But that's just my opinion.
Yes.
Interesting. You're hearing a lot of predictions right now about 2017, and then you've got the people talking about incoming that's supposed to be anywhere between August of this year and next year. It just seems like you said they're pushing this agenda, and they're using the fear tactics.
I would look for some significant economic things going on in 2017 that will push things forward a little bit more. And I think the outcome of the U.S. elections at the end of 2016 is going to have an impact on what's going to happen globally as well. I think it's an important year. It's just not the year, and I'm not going to get caught up into what the last 7 years are until we can, physically see Babylon and the world government come along. That just has to be there first. So Chad, you had a few things you wanted to get into on end time prophecy?
Well, I mean, I definitely wanted to touch on you with the two witnesses. I've got my opinion. I know we've had this discussion before, but I think it's definitely worth putting out there. You know where I stand on the two witnesses, and I think we both agree on that.
Yeah, I think the standard one is that the two witnesses are going to be, Enoch and Elijah.
Yes.
And I've thrown in another one, and I think Elijah is coming back, but I think he's going to be more part of leading the second Exodus as one of the seven shepherds, and perhaps an eighth, and you can describe who you want that eighth to be. It could either be Elijah or it could be Jesus leading that second Exodus. And again, that just so people have a quick understanding what I'm talking about, that is part of that Exodus that Jesus is talking about at the time of the abomination when the people of Israel are to flee to the desert. But it's bigger than that because it's the lost tribes, and Jesus is the one that's going to lead them from the four corners of the earth to the desert to protect them for 1,290 days, which is what Revelation 12 is really about, as opposed to what they're going to talk about from the Gnostic religions and the apparitions of Mary. But the person that I would throw in is the disciple that Jesus loved, is a third candidate. And I think it happens to be Nathanael. And in my book, I'll go into some reasons why I think it's him, and when he was picked up as a disciple, and when he sort of disappears off the disciple aspect of it. But he's not a well-known figure, and here's why. He says, if you go into John 21, Jesus talks about the disciple that Jesus loved, and this is in the last chapter of John, and it says, if I wanted him to remain alive until I return, what is it to you? You must follow me. And then it says, because of this, the rumor spread among the brothers that this disciple would not die. But Jesus did not say that he would not die. He only said, if I want him to remain alive until I return, what is that to you? This is the disciple who testifies to things and wrote them down. We know that his testimony is true. So when I look at what are these two witnesses supposed to do, and what are they testifying to for 3.5 years before they're they actually meet the first death. And it needs to be somebody who, in my conclusions on connecting the dots, who hasn't died yet. So that leaves possibly the disciple that Jesus loved, leaves Elijah, and it leaves Enoch, son of Jared. And you can make a good argument for all three of them to be that prophet. One is Enoch. He would be able to clearly testify to the people what happened before the flood, as opposed to what we're going to be indoctrinated with from the secret societies and the polytheist religions as to what happened. And this is the second apocalypse. The first one is the apocalypse of water, and this is the apocalypse of fire that we're coming along. So he could legitimately testify to what happened to cause the first apocalypse and what's going to happen here, and be a legitimate testimony to set the record straight. And Elijah is also said to make the way for Jesus. And so, John was like Elijah, John the Baptist, when Jesus first returned, but Elijah is supposed to make the way from the wilderness for Jesus. So does that mean he's going to testify about the Holy Covenant and the accuracy and the prophecies of who Jesus is, or is he going to be the one who is going to lead the way in the wilderness, or the second Exodus, for the Messiah to lead the second Exodus? And for the disciple that Jesus loved from the passage that I read, is he the best testimony to testify to the world who Jesus is before the wrath comes? And you can make an argument for all three. Just as people can make an argument for Moses, and other people, except that all these other people died. And it's scripturally recorded as dying. So, but then people will say, well, Moses was there at the transformation with Elijah, and okay, fair ball, but he's not going to suffer the second death there. I mean, that just doesn't make any sense to me. But I could be wrong on that. But my conclusion is that all three are coming. It's just what is their role. And I look at the two witnesses more as the testifying to the first apocalypse and the testifying to Jesus' commission and time on earth as the final warning. And then Elijah, even though he'll be testifying to the original covenant, I think his role is more with Israel than it is from a global Gentile perspective. But I could go tomorrow and say, well, yeah, I agree, it's Elijah too, because all three are in play, all three are possible.
Yeah.
But only two are mentioned.
The other thing that I definitely wanted you to touch on is I know that you hear people talking about Nibiru and Planet X and all that all the time. Well, we know that wormwood is in the Bible. We know that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The thing is with a planet that's coming into play that is going to cause some catastrophic destruction, is the size of a planet getting too close destroys the world. It doesn't just cause massive damage, right? And this is a destruction before, if I've got my timing right in Revelation, before a third of the people are destroyed, or part of the third destruction. So it doesn't destroy the whole world. And I think a planet coming into place is just overkill. Like, it just is too much. And the other thing I don't like about Planet X or Nibiru is that's really out of the ancient alien and Anunnaki belief system that this planet comes around every so often, and the Anunnaki will return at that point. And I just have a lot of issues with all of that.
Yeah, and I know that Dr. Heiser has actually, gone on record and said that Stitchen did not, translate the text correctly. And he said that he's actually challenged, anybody that wants to go on record and try to say that, Stitchen was correct, or Stitchen himself, that he would totally annihilate him.
Yeah, and I couldn't tell you whether or not he translated them correctly or not, but I found that it was, because I read many of Stitchen's book, I just found his what he said he translated was a bit suspect, and I have nothing really to base it on. It just is a little bit out there in terms of, taking down the level of who these Anunnaki gods were, and I think that was his agenda to do that.
Well, also we know that Stitchin was also a Freemason. I know that
Yes.
you've seen the photos of him and the Masonic gear, so.
Yeah.
I
So
always felt that wormwood was related to radiation in the last few years because Chernobyl on its translation means wormwood,
exactly.
and the radiation is poisoning our water. It's turning it bitter.
When that comes about, I mean, this is in the trumpet catastrophes of Revelation where we come up with wormwood. And, at the end of the trumpets is World War III. And so all of the trumpets are part of this battle at the midpoint of the tribulation, the Third World War, where the Gog War, where these alliance of armies are going to invade the land of Israel, and God defends Israel at that point in time. And so I think that's exactly right, that out of that war is a nuclear holocaust. Because if you're going to have war, you're going to take out these nuclear facilities, or you're going to drop probably nuclear weapons in a war of this size. And so I would agree with you, Kay, that I think it's nuclear fallout.
That's a very dire warning right there.
And again, people are looking for that for wormwood before the start of the last 7 years. And again, we have to make sure that we read the Bible and let it and tell its story in its normal linear fashion, in my opinion, and how I approach prophecy, and then match that up with what it says in the Old Testament. Because again, I mean, I did a seminar on the trumpets in Evansville with that John Pounders, now UCTV, got David Carrico and myself and Rob Skiba together to speak at. And I did mine on the trumpets and the times of the trumpet. And it's amazing how consistently the Old Testament is with trumpets and what the meanings of the trumpet feasts are, and how this plays out during the midpoint of the tribulation that leads to, again, this will be rather controversial for a lot of Christians, and I don't want anything that I say to divide Christians. We all have our different opinions on it. I'll say opinions because everybody likes to say they know 100% for sure. All I'll say is from what I've learned in the Bible, this is what I've come to believe, is that the rapture is more of a mid-trib event, and the exact timing of that mid-trib, before, after mid, take your pick. And I know people will also take issue with me using the word tribulation. That's fine, the last 7 years, if people are more comfortable with that. So that whole trumpet event is happening towards the middle point of the last 7 years. So we need to have people understand that this is not wormwood that happens before the last 7 years. So if we do have some nuclear issues, we still have this coming at us. And I do believe we're going to see something nuclear that cattle herds people into the world religion and into the world government.
What are your opinions on the whole Brexit and all the other countries over there wanting to get out of the European Union?
Well, it's been my opinion all along that the 10-nation empire, the world government of the last days, is not a single kingdom. It is a group of countries. And it's also been my opinion all along that the European community, as it was growing and became with so many countries, isn't going to be that 10-nation empire, or 13 as some people tried to manipulate it to be until it went beyond that number. And it isn't going to be as it was situated, because that union is going to split. It's still going to be these unions. And what you're seeing is, I think, is prophecy being fulfilled, even though there's not a specific prophecy for this, but it leads to the fulfillment of these 10 economic zones or spheres of influence or groups of nations, whatever you want to call them. Whereas I think that European Union is going to be split into two. One is going to be dominated by Germany. That will probably include Austria and a lot of the southern, or at least make that more into the middle of Europe. And then you're going to have another one that is dominated by Britain and France. And again, I like that from just a historical, here we go again. If you look at the Holy Roman Empire, it never included Germany. And so it wouldn't surprise me to see one of those groups of being very, very close to what the Roman Empire looked like is in the Holy Roman or the European side of it. So I think that they're going to find a way to, and it may take a few years, to split this thing up, and it's going to be reorganized, but it'll split into two. It'll never come back together as one. And one of the issues with the European community is they've been trying to throw too many centralist imposed laws and doctrines and restrictions on the people, and they'll need to come back to how the New Atlantis is supposed to be set up. And the model for the New Atlantis is the United States, and they need to permit more state freedom as what the United States has, not less state freedom as what the EEC imposed on. So I think you're going to see that coming back to more of how the states of America, they do have a central government, but they have strong state rights. And I think you're going to see that when these things finalized, and that also goes to the Daniel prophecies, why this whole end-time empire is like iron and clay, because they don't mix well together, right? There's struggle that's back and forth. So there has to be something that's set up that allows for that struggle, but still keeps them umbrellaed. And that's the key, is that word umbrella for both the religion and for the government and how this whole thing works.
Okay. What are your thoughts on Hillary Clinton becoming the next president?
Well, 50-50 chance, right?
Good answer.
This is a crossroads election for the United States, as what it was in 2008, and for the most powerful nation on earth. And I think Hillary would accelerate things for the end time. I think Trump would not accelerate it at that same speed. I kind of go back and forth as to which one I think I'm going to is going to win it, because I think it's going to come down to events. And if it does come down to events, then I think Trump wins. Trump will win because of what's the feeling of what the British people had with the European community and the absolute outrage and hostility, not in a violent way, but from a frustration level of what I think has been building with so much of the American people, that a few more events will assure Trump winning it. But Trump is such a wild card, he could blow the election at any point in time. So, and I also don't think Mr. Trump is going to be the savior of Christians, or do the things that people think he's going to do. He's a narcissist as much as Obama is, I think, and he only looks after what's in his own interests. So I think anything is better than Hillary Clinton, and I say that with a grain of salt, if I can put it that way. But I'm not sure. I'm really not sure who's going to win this one. I think I think this is going to be a roller coaster year of events, and I think events will decide who's going to win the election. But neither one of those two will decide who wins it.
I still have this overwhelming feeling that we're not going to have an election. something is going to take place, that martial law will be declared and Obama will remain in office.
Well, and I think that remains a distinct possibility. One would hope that we're not moving that quickly in the direction, because that will definitely speed up the end times if that were to happen. But things could get out of hand in a hurry, and there's been so many different things that have been set up over the last 10 or 15 years to take the government away from democracy that will never return. But I also think that's more of a play that the Antichrist is going to do, where he's going to usurp the world government, as opposed to us seeing that this close to the end time. But it's certainly possible, because if things get wild in the streets for whatever reasons, then I think Obama would try and implement martial law. But and I know there's a lot of people that think that he wants a third term, and maybe he does, but I think he wants more. I think he wants to be more powerful on the world stage, and I think he wants to get a hold of the UN. And I don't think he's the Antichrist. So let's be clear on this. I think he's one of the people that helps set up the time of the Antichrist. Because this Antichrist figures is going to be, I think, relatively unknown, and will rise very rapidly in popularity as he helps the Babylon negotiate the world covenant that forms the world government, and then rises quickly with fame. Remember how quickly Obama rose in popularity? That's
overnight,
the type of rise, almost overnight, right? But it's hard to hold that, right? And he's got so much division and people against him already. I think he's the wrong person to be Antichrist. So, but I do believe he believes he can have more of an impact to set up world government by moving into the UN, and I think that's where he's headed. But I mean, who knows? He is a narcissist, and he just may say, you know what, I like this job better than being the head of the UN. I believe that the only way world government is going to happen is the U.S. government has to be overthrown in a coup, whether it's through martial law or whatever, so that the will of the people can't come out and vote.
That makes sense. Chad, did you have some more questions? I know you had a lot of them that we were talking about.
I was going to let him go back in and start talking some more about the timelines and stuff. Did you want to touch on the Seven Trumpets?
Yeah, we can touch on the Seven Trumpets if you like. I think it's a very, very important aspect of prophecy. And the first thing that I think, not the first thing, that's probably an overstatement, but one of the things that I think people need to do if they're going to learn about prophecy is they need to go back and learn about the feasts of the Lord. And I know it's not popular for people to spend a lot of time in the Old Covenant and in the old ways of Israel, but everything that happens centers around Israel, and that covenant is not void, and that's why the lost tribes are not lost, and they will have an impact in the end time. And we have to understand that a lot of what is being talked about in old-time prophecy is for Judah and for Israel, and it's not for the Christian church. And everybody thinks that the Christian church inherits everything. Well, no, prophecy is quite specific. So even though we are part of the covenant and we are grafted in, the old covenant in Israel is still available, is still there, and are going to play a significant role in the end time. So understanding how these things are going to play out is very, very important. And the thing is about the trumpets is that it is a very sort of ancient sort of meaning to it. And it is an understanding of things that are going to happen with the blowing of the trumpet. And so it's an announcement of the destruction, and it's also an announcement of the renewal of the earth. And So when you go back into what happened with Israel and when they used the trumpets in the Exodus, and Jericho would be a classic example of when the trumpets were used and how that had a prophetic sort of implication as to what was going to happen in the land of the covenant, because it was a time of destruction where the giants were going to be thrown out of the land that they had waited in ambush to destroy the nation of hope, and then it was going to be renewed and regrow again with Israel being in the land of the covenant. And so anytime you hear of a trumpet in the Old Testament, and there's going to be a lot of people that will disagree with this, but when you hear, whether it's, let's say it's in Joel, it says, blow a trumpet in Zion. And then further on is, for the day of the Lord is coming. The trumpet is a prophetic marker of events. And you can line up partly through the trumpets and what it says, Old Testament prophecies to the seven trumpets. And of course, the seventh trumpet is the one that introduces the wrath bowls. And so that's the wrath of God, and that begins at about the 3.5 point time in the last 7 years, and within that is the crowning of the Antichrist. So let's understand that the trumpets play a very, very, very important role, and there are so many places in the Old Testament where we hear of trumpets being blown, and they will just shine a light on what is going on in the end time. And it's also, if you want to get a good understanding of why you have to use the trumpets as a marker, let's go back to one of my doctrines or beliefs that I utilize. Is let's go back and see what Jesus said. And it's amazing that he actually uses in the sign of his coming that there will be a loud trumpet call. And then they will gather his elect from the four winds. And so again, as you start to connect the different aspects of what Jesus said, what the trumpets say, and the Old Testament says, and link them into the days of the trumpet, things tend to fall in place fairly quickly. Do you have any questions on that? Because I can continue or give you a chance to say, well, what about this or what about that?
Nah.
Okay, go ahead and continue. This
Yes,
is really
please.
interesting.
Okay. And also at the time of that trumpet, when Jesus is talking about, that is also the time of when the abominations, and when he says, when you see what the prophet Daniel was talking about, and the abomination, that's the time for the people of Judea to flee to the desert. So again, this is the time of not only the rapture, this is also the time of the second Exodus, and it's also the time of the fall of Babylon. Even though the description of the fall of Babylon follows after the trumpets, there's one verse in just before the end of the trumpets in Revelation where it has the fall of Babylon, and then you get the description later. So again, if you just let the Bible read for itself, it'll explain these things and give you an order that makes some sense. And just as people are wondering about, well, what makes you think that is related to the rapture trumpets? I mean, Second Thessalonians is a classic one. Where it says something to the effect that the coming of Jesus is in for the Christians being gathered to him. That doesn't happen until the rebellion occurs and the man of lawlessness is revealed, and he sets himself up to be God in the temple. And that, if you look back at Matthew in terms of what Jesus says about the trumpets, is exactly that same timing. So, and then there are other references about the trumpets in the New Testament, where, let's say, 1 Corinthians, it says, it's at the last trumpet. So one may even presume it was right at the midpoint, just before the wrath comes with the bowl judgment. So again, I'm just sort of running through my mind on some things where the trumpets are a significant marker for when the end time is going to come. Okay, and just as also is be aware of that same timing about a banner, because there will be a banner that appears at the same timing, and that's when everybody can see Jesus in the sky. But it's also referred to in the Old Testament as a banner, and that's very, very important for the second Exodus. So keep an eye on it for the banner, and I think Zechariah explains that the best. Says Zechariah 9, I think it says, is the Lord will appear over them, and his arrow will flash like lightning, and the Lord will sound the trumpet. I mean, I don't know how to connect that a little bit better than that. I mean, we're talking about the banner, we're defining what the banner is, we're talking about what the New Testament says, that everybody will see Jesus, and we're also talking about the time when the time of Israel will recognize Jesus as the one that they pierced, and we're also connected with a trumpet, and I just find that so powerful.
It's interesting because in the Bible, when one thing is brought up and the words are said, you can go through the entire Bible, and when it's used in one place, that word means exactly the same thing and has the same power when you read it in another place in the Bible.
Exactly, and that's why it's important to define what the Bible is saying within the Bible, because that's the only place you can properly understand it. You can try and interpret it yourself, and you can use outside interpretations and meanings, but you're probably going to go sideways on what their true meaning is.
Mm-hmm. The line upon line, precept upon precept, and that's something that we have to keep in mind when we do study the Bible, that's why we cross-reference within the Bible itself.
Exactly. And so look for the trumpets for, like I say, for the rapture. Look for the trumpets for the second Exodus, and that's going to guide you through that. And one of the reasons why Israel has to be reconciled in these last days is because it's really about the Holy Covenant. And Israel had two choices. Was one to, as we all have choices, but to fulfill their destiny through the blessings of the covenant or fulfill their destiny through the curses of the covenant. And because they did not honor God and hold the law and always worship Him and continue to backslide, they were sent into exile. And so what could have been was delayed. But what God has planned will always take place. And He said right from the beginning that, this is going to happen either through the blessings or through the curses. And so Israel and the world had to go through the curses. But within the curses and all of the things that happened to Israel and to the world, even at that, God will restore their fortunes, and He's going to have compassion on them, and He's going to gather them again from the nations where He scattered them. And He'll do this in the days of the trumpet. And so Israel, that's gathered by Jesus, and probably Elijah, in my understanding, they'll be gathered from the four corners of the earth, and they're going to meet Judea in the desert. They're going to be all protected there. And then there's going to be the dragon in Revelation 12 is going to spew this great river. Well, again, this great river is spoken about in the Old Testament. And this is going to be an unleashing of the Euphrates and perhaps other rivers through the dams that have been created. They are going to probably be destroyed, and they're going to try and destroy the exiting and fleeing Judeans in the desert. But again, God is going to save them. And what He does is in Revelation, which is absolutely extraordinary on the words, is He's going to save them on the wings of eagles. We only get that at one other time in the Bible, and that's in the first Exodus. And again, those wings of eagles is a clear for me, prophetic marker and understanding of what they're talking about. But Judea is only one part of the whole mix. So look for that during the times of the trumpet. And also in the days of the trumpet is the release of the people of the abyss. And I believe these are the fallen angels that procreated with the daughters of men before the flood, and perhaps even the worst of the demons. They are going to be released at the start of the trumpets. And so understanding the days of the trumpet is to me is key, because once you get past the trumpets, it's really like a denouement. It's just a wrap up to the whole thing, because the rebellion has reached its full measure, and now it's in decline with retribution, and then with the final battle at Armageddon. When I talked about that river, it just sort of hit me again. Is that give you a couple examples where you might want to look to see where I was talking about the Euphrates River, and Isaiah 27 would be one of those verses. I should have mentioned it sooner, but I couldn't come up with the verse in my head. Anyways, it says in Isaiah something to the effect, I'm going to try and paraphrase again, is that the Lord is going to, thresh from the Euphrates, and the Israelites are going to be gathered up one by one, and in that day a trumpet will sound. And again, what we see there is a linking of the trumpet. We have this Euphrates River that is going to try and wash over Israel, and we have more than Judea being mentioned, and the Israelites are going to be gathered up one by one as they were in the Exodus on the wings of eagles, which doesn't say wings of eagle in Isaiah, but very interesting that, again, I always love how the symmetry of the Bible works. As I said earlier in the show, it's just amazing how it all comes together. And again, in the next verse, because this is a continuation of what Isaiah is talking about, in Isaiah 28 says, when an overwhelming scourge sweeps by. Absolutely amazing. And it says, water will overflow you in your hiding place, but your covenant of death will not stand. And I know people say this covenant of death has nothing to do with the last 7 years. But if you tie everything together and let it speak together, this is the start of the overthrow of the covenant of death, the 7-year world government that protects the Judeans in Israel. This is covenant death is now being annulled. And when World War III happens with the invasion of Gog and Magog, the Antichrist steps in, and then he moves his army into Israel, does the abomination, and then boom, the covenant of death is annulled when an overwhelming scourge sweeps by you. It will carry you away, morning after morning, day and night. And what is really awesome about that, it goes on to say something to the effect that, and it will sweep through, and the understanding of this message will bring sheer terror to the reader. This is Revelation 12.
That's mind-blowing.
And again, I can go on, and I could probably go on and on and on, but I've probably made my point of how I'm using the markers to connect Revelation, and it just sort of illuminates what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I mean, if you go, like, say, into Isaiah 43, and it says something to the effect where God has summoned Israel by name. He says, you are mine, and when you pass through the waters, I will be with you. What waters? The waters of Revelation 12. And they will not sweep over you. And when you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. And they're going to be attacked by the dragon and the nations from all over the world as they exodus. And he's going to bring them from all over the earth.
I think Isaiah is one of the most prophetic books in the Bible.
It is.
The way
I mean,
it lines up with Revelation is amazing.
Amazingly well. Obviously one of the big three prophets of, Isaiah, but so many prophecies. Has to have the most of the significant prophecies, at least for the end time, anyways.
Hmm.
And again, in Micah, I mean, this is just absolutely stunning when you think about it. When it says, God is going to gather all of Jacob, and again, you have to apply Jacob and I'm trying to think of the other ones that go with it, to Israel. There's a couple other names: Jacob, Joseph, and Israel. All of those ones where they specifically say Jacob and Joseph and Israel, apply those to the northern kingdom, and then when it says Judah, apply those to the southern kingdom for the prophecies. So in Micah 2, it talks about gathering all of Jacob, not all of Judah here. And this is the time of Revelation 12, at the time when the people of Judea and the recognizable people of Judea are fleeing to the desert. He's going to bring together the remnant of Israel. He's going to bring them together like sheep in a pen, like a flock in a pasture. And one who breaks open the way will go before them. Their king will pass through before them, the Lord at their head. So at the time of the trumpets, Jesus is going to lead the second Exodus. And you don't hear people talking about this.
No. And that's something that everyone should know.
Yeah, and again, in Ezekiel, it talks about taking Ephraim's stick, and as I talked about, Ephraim is son of Joseph. So again, Ephraim is the leader of Israel, and they're going to take Ephraim's stick that belonged to Joseph and the house of Israel and all the tribes associated with them, and they're going to join them together in one stick with Judea and Judah and the tribes associated with them, and he's going to gather all the people from around the world, and there'll never again be two nations, and his servant David will be king over them. And that's in Ezekiel 37. And when is Ezekiel 37? The time of the Gog-Magog war that leads to the second Exodus.
What do you believe that Gog and Magog are, Gary?
Well, I think for sure they are the descendants of Gog and Magog in prophecy, and we see Gog and Magog descendants come up in the Ezekiel War or World War III, and also at the end of the millennium. And I think if you follow what some people have traced, I know there's disagreement on this as there is in most prophecy, but Magog and Gog and some other names with them are descendants of the Scythians, and including Mesesh, which is the root word for Moscow and Muscovites. And so I truly believe that the Scythians, which were the survivors as part of the Titan rebellion, the Nephilim rebellion, who escaped from Tartarus after the flood, which I'll talk about in my book Genesis 6 Conspiracy, who not only went north and west in their migrations, they also went into the Promised Land, and we know them as the Nephilim that are unaccounted for in the New Testament, and particularly all of the nations that Israel had to exterminate in taking the covenant land. The descendants of Japheth married in with these descendants, and some of these giants' names are very well known, and of course probably the most famous are Gog and Magog, two of the same names that are sons of Japheth. Well, I think what happens there is that the sons of Japheth intermarry with these giants and take their names, just as Amalek did the same thing with the inhabitants of Seir, or the Horites, as I think the Amalekite supernation became. Certainly Amalek in the Gnostic scripture was a giant, and we also had descendants of Ham intermarrying with descendants of giants in Canaan. And so I think the same thing happened with the descendants of Japheth. And they took on the name Gog and Magog, and they're the Scythians, and they're the ones that migrated north into the Slavic areas, and you can even extend some of that alliance probably into Germany. And so when I talk about the spheres of influence or the economic zones as they're going to be developing, and I had mentioned earlier that Germany will lead one, and you can imagine that Russia will lead lead another one of these ones. They will partner in this war as they invade Israel. And so I think when they're talking about Gog and Magog, they're talking about, yes, the descendants of Japheth, yes, the Scythians, but yet there's this Nephilim bloodline that is part of what is causing this war, because they essentially bring down and start the ability for the Antichrist to take power. They actually are the ones that are bringing down the world government at that time. And then they're the ones that are leading the rebellion at the end of the 1,000 years. So what I'm saying is this: I think there's something in the DNA, something in the blood, something in what makes the descendants of Gog and Magog tick that leads to war against the people of Israel, just like the Amalekites had the blood oath to wipe Israel from the face of the earth. I think that's part of that Nephilim DNA, that reprobate spirit that they just can't seem to dislodge. And so I think it's very appropriate that it would be those descendants, and in this case coming down from Russia and Middle Europe, and obviously some other countries in the Middle East in that alliance that people want to check out, like Libya and a few other and Persia, of course, with Iran, and of course you can see that geopolitical thing meshing up nicely. This is a geopolitical thing that's happening before our eyes of an alliance that's going to cause this war. But to answer your question, definitely the Slavs.
Thank you. It's so interesting because you hear all the time people will put tags to what Gog and Magog are,
Yep.
and they're totally, I feel, off track.
Yeah, and again, it's easy to go off track, and maybe I'm off track, but I know they come from the far north. That's quite clear, and many nations with them. And I think we have enough historical evidence to link the Russians and the Slavs and part of the Germanic tribes back to descendants from the Black Sea area, which was the Scythians, and that's when I also intermixed the things that I wrote about in my book. So I may be wrong, but I'm pretty comfortable with that assumption.
Sounds right on target to me. How about you, Chad?
Sounds good.
Did you have any more questions for Gary, Chad?
No, I did not. I know that's shocking for Gary because he knows I love to ask him questions.
I know. I've been surprised. You've been so quiet with your questions tonight, so I don't know whether or not I'm shocking you, or you're just saying, yeah, that makes some sense, or you totally disagree with me so much you don't want to interrupt.
Oh no, it's very, very interesting. So I'm just sitting back listening.
It's, like I said, Gary, if I had you in college, it would have been great. You could have been my professor and everything would have been.
Okay, you're cutting out real bad.
Am I?
Yeah.
Can you? How about now?
Still breaking up.
Yeah, you're still breaking up.
So, I kind of think that's a pretty good show in itself. It's basically sort of the front half of the of prophecy without getting into specific, trumpet blasts and things like that. So, or we can spend a little bit more time on the trumpets if you want.
If you want, I mean, we could definitely have you back on here, and we could do some more on the end times prophecy, because I know you could talk about this for hours.
Yeah, you kind of get going on it. Just there's so much prophecy on end time that it's hard to get them all up in your head at the same time. But I really like the idea of talking about the trumpets today. We haven't even talked about the Assyrian and how that plays into the same sort of aspect and things like that. But
Gary, did you want to let the people know where they can find you and how they can get in contact with you, and definitely let them know that they need to order your book. Like I said, Christmas is going to be coming up soon, so you definitely need to order multiple copies and give them out the gifts for every member of your family.
Yeah, for people wanting to get a hold of my book, and it's called The Genesis 6 Conspiracy, How Secret Societies and the Descendants of Giants Plan to Enslave Humankind, you can get it through Amazon.com, Amazon.ca, Amazon.uk, Amazon around the world, BarnesandNoble.com. Most online websites will have my book. You can also get it through a bookstore or a Christian bookstore. If they don't have it on the shelf, they can order it through Send the Light Distribution or Ingram's, because it's distributed by those two companies. And if you want an autographed book, you can go to my website, www.genesis6conspiracy.com. That's Genesis 6 with the number 6, and go to Buy Now and buy from author, and you can have it personalized any way that you want. I also have links on there to Amazon and Barnes & Noble if you like, and it's also available in Kindle version. So if you want a digital copy, you can also buy it in Kindle version. And you can follow me on Twitter at GaryWayne63. That's at GaryWayne63. And you can also follow me on Facebook under Gary Wayne, and I have 2 Genesis 6 conspiracy pages. And if you want to ask me questions on anything we talked about tonight or something that is on your mind, you can contact me through my website, through Twitter, or on Facebook, and I will get back to you.
Yes, he will. Gary is real good about getting back and discussing anything that anybody asks him about. Okay, Gary, we are getting ready to wrap this up. Did you want to take us out with the closing prayer?
No, I think I'll let you guys do that. You guys do that much better than me.
All right, well, I guess I'll go ahead and I'll take us out with a closing prayer. All right, dear Lord, I want to thank you for this evening, for having Gary on here to basically let us, come together and talk about the end times. We are excited about the end times. We can't wait for Jesus to come back and take us all home. That is something that we are all excited about, and we just thank you for weighing on everybody's hearts tonight. And if there's anybody that has not come to know Jesus, we pray that they do. And we thank you for all that you do for us and all that you continue to do for us. And we thank you very much. We love you, and amen.
Eyes in the sky, gazing far into the night. I raise my hand to the fire, but it's no use, 'cause you can't stop it from shining through. It's true, baby, let the light shine through. If you believe it's true, baby, won't you let the light